Alright, in this video we're gonna see how to create a pivot table. In the last video we saw how to load data into a normal table, but now we're gonna load it creating a pivot table, okay? So the process for doing so from scratch is just selecting an empty cell, going to the insert tab in the menu and the pivot table option, which will open the create pivot table dialog. And so for this, we will use the option use an external data source, choose connection. It will open our ODBC driver dialog. We select our connection. We enter our credentials. It will open the query dialog and we just run our query where we like. Okay, then we just run it and load it as we have seen in the previous video, and that would be it. I'm not gonna do it right now because it will take a long time. So we have already loaded a pivot table with some parameters already configured over here, so we can see how the end result will be. But when you created your pivot table, you will have it empty. So you won't have all of these fields. So I'm going to remove them and add them one by one, okay? So I will have, when we create our pivot table from scratch, we will see this in the spreadsheet, and in the right, when we click inside the pivot table area, right, we will see the pivot table fields panel in the right. So here is where we select the fields for our pivot table. So I'm going to select. Okay, first we have four main categories where we can put the fields, and each category has a different function, of course. So the most basic, or the first field that we should configure, are the rows and columns. Okay, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna look for the zip code, and we're gonna put it in the columns. Okay, we can put it in the rows, and it will be as rows. Okay, if we put it in the values, okay, it will be the values of the pivot table. Okay, we will leave it in row for the moment, and then we're gonna add year, the year field. Okay, you can see that I'm searching for it here in the search box for the pivot table fields. So I will select year build, okay, and drop it into the columns. So now we have our table with row and columns. Okay, we have the zip code as row and the year as column. And I'm gonna look for the price, okay, the sales close price. I'm gonna add that to the value, okay. And now I have a pivot table um, with the zip code field as row, the year as column, and the sales close price as value. And so right now we're calculating the total sum of the value, which in this case is sales close price. So here we have the sum of the value for this column, and over here we have it for this. So what we're gonna do next is to add some filters. I'm gonna add a city filter. You will see that it appears over here above the pivot table. I'm gonna also add the neighborhood field as filter, and also we can remember that we can add any field that we want. For example, we can have over here this in the columns, rows, or values parameters. Okay, so you can play with this and do the configuration that you want uh, to use in the pivot table. Okay, One other trick that we can do is, I mentioned that we are right now calculating the sum total of the sales close price, okay? And this is the total because we are not applying any filter right now, but I can apply a filter right here in the filter. In this case, in the city filter, I can apply a filter and say I just want this, okay? And it will filter it by any of the values that you give it, okay? For example, right now I'm filtering with this value, which is RUSF in the city, okay? And I'm gonna leave it without filtering right now, okay? Just to show the functionality of the filters, okay? So, as I was telling you, this total, we can modify it and say, I don't want the sum total of the sales gross price, I want the average, okay? So, to do that, I would come to the value parameter and right click, okay? Here we see that right now we are visualizing the sum of sales close price, and I want to visualize the average of sales close price, so I will right click over here in the field, okay, and select field settings, all right? And then this will open this dialog, okay, the pivot table field dialog, and what I will say, you can choose another name over there, and I can say instead of sum I want the average, okay, and just can select from some predetermined basic metrics over here, and I'm going to select the average, okay? So I say okay, and right now you can see that it's calculating the average of the sales close price instead of the sum, okay? So these are the basic dynamics of the pivot table inside Excel. We are loading our data straight from the database, and so you can play with any of the fields we have over here, and you can also tune the metric you want to show in the field settings dialog over here, okay? So this will be everything for now, and if you get any doubt, reach to me and I'll be happy to help.